Hayes, and I'm here to present my project on project-based learning. Okay, so project-based learning is not necessarily a new line of thought. However, it is becoming more and more accepted as we have to transition to the Common Core and really encapsulate all of the requirements of the uh, standard, but still keep the learning engaging. So, when asked about the best idea for fixing K through 12 education, George Lucas said it's project-based learning. In today's world, students need three fundamental skills. They need to know how to find information, how to assess the quality of information, and how to creatively and effectively use the information to accomplish a goal. So a lot of people are seeing this as a way for students to transition into the real world beyond high school and really build those skills while in school that will just really help them in whatever happens after they graduate high school. So, first off, what is project-based learning? Project-based learning is defined as a teaching method in which students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to a complex question, problem, or challenge. Okay, so that's a little wordy, but essentially project-based learning is where student learning takes place during a project or portfolio building, and the students are working in many steps toward a goal. So it is exactly what it sounds like. It is learning that is based on a project. It can be a portfolio, it can be a project. We're going to look at a few different examples of how those turned out for different teachers. It also depends on your subject area, the age of the kids, but all of it can be used with great success as long as you have a lot of planning. So, why is project-based learning important? Well, I already let you know that George Lucas even said he views that as the solution to what's wrong with K through 12 education. Project-based learning is more heavily used in European countries, and they're seeing excellent results. So it's something that they're trying to integrate into the American education system. So why is it important? Well, according to Learning Environments Research, which is a journal written specifically about learning environments and teacher strategies, says powerful learning environments formed through project-based learning have the purpose to develop an educational setting where the student's learning is the core issue and instruction is defined as learning enhancing. Students are not passive recipients of information, but they actively construct their knowledge and skills through interaction with the environment and through reorganization of their own mental structures. Again, a little bit wordy, but essentially what they're saying is project-based learning makes that learning environment where learning is the main focus. Too often now, especially with the integration of Common Core in the state of Ohio, do we get caught up in trying to meet the standard. And there are ways to meet the standard without always having to draw attention to the fact that you are trying to meet a standard. So for instance, I know in many schools it is common to have to write the standard of the day on the board. So students, when the principal walks in, can specifically say, okay, this is a standard I'm learning today. Well, I'm not really sure how that benefits students other than letting them know what they'll be learning for the day. But what I feel is project-based learning allows you to meet those standards without having to have the class recite it or even draw their attention to this is specifically what you're learning. They learn in a more organic, whole sense of really getting in-depth learning. And I'll go into more detail as to what I mean by in-depth learning and education. What it essentially boils down to are more engaging learning environments make for more in-depth learning. So I'm sure you can think of that teacher that you had at some point, hopefully you had more than one, who just led you into a classroom, setting where you felt like learning was cool, learning was fun, learning was important, and just really encompass that with everything you did in the classroom. And honestly, that's my personal goal as a teacher. So I'm going to go over the project-based learning building blocks with you, and it just shows you exactly what project-based learning is founded on. It's more than just having a project. It goes beyond that. So for instance, the first one is engaging content. At its core, the project is focused on teaching students important knowledge and skills derived from standards and key concepts at the heart of academic subjects. Okay, so of course you're going to be teaching standards, but it goes beyond that. You need to have engaging learning, engaging content. Every state and school has key concepts that you're required to teach, but that does not mean these key concepts have to be boring. You can come up with interesting and engaging ways to learn these key concepts. And that's the basis of the project-based learning. Starting right is the key to success at the end. So incorporating student voice and choice into the project, organizing a project schedule, and having clear benchmarks are what are going to set the students up for success. Start with engaging content. The whole project will stay engaging. And we'll talk about how you go about starting that project. So at the core, project-based learning is about building competencies. So even George Lucas was talking about the skills that students need to grasp before they leave school. And it's all about building competencies that are valuable for today's world, like problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity innovation, which are explicitly taught and assessed. We will go into assessment, but that is obviously one of the most important parts of the learning process to make sure that something was learned. But you need to teach all of those things through your project-based learning, your project. And that might sound intimidating, but once you get going, it really actually comes kind of intuitively. So a lot of project-based learning is built on groups. It does not have to be in a group setting, but with that group setting, you get that build of collaboration and communication. Many of the jobs that students will take on in the future will require collaboration and communication, and project-based learning prepares the students for these lifelong expectations. An example of a group-based project-based learning project was when I spent time at the Dayton STEM school. There was a really interesting project that they do every year where they work as a team to build the better bottle rocket, and they actually get into rocket and propulsion sciences. They have engineers come from local engineering firms and even from the base, and they really get to work with the students as they work in groups to come up with how to build that better bottle rocket and who can reach the highest altitude, which gets a little ridiculous when you get professional engineers involved in that learning. Okay, inquiry. Students are engaged in an extended, rigorous process of asking questions, using resources, and developing answers. So, of course, you can have inquiry. You can have something as basic as answer these 5 questions and then ask 3 yourself. Okay, really basic inquiry, not really getting a whole lot out of the students, unfortunately. This is about not just inquiry, but in-depth inquiry. Students need to learn to ask questions that improve the quality of their learning. So research and focused inquiry will add to the depth of education going on. Students need to learn to ask the right questions that will improve. And of course, teachers can also ask the questions that'll get it started. In fact, a lot of projects start out with the teacher asking a question for the students to answer. So, for instance, how do you build the better bottle rocket? and then they grow from there. And you just keep poking and prodding and nudging to opening those doors and getting the students really thinking about it. That's where we get to the driving questions. Project work is focused by an open-ended question that students understand and find intriguing, which captures their task or frames their exploration. So focusing students on a single question is how you set up the project-based learning assignment and assessment. Did the students answer the question? That could be, and probably should be, one of the major things that you're assessing, because your driving question or questions are what is propelling this project forward and giving the project meaning. I will show you an example of a few projects, and we'll talk about what that driving question was to really start that off. What do I need to know? Students see the need to gain knowledge, understand concepts, and apply skills in order to answer the driving question and create project products, beginning with an entry event that generates interest and curiosity. Okay, so first you introduce a topic with an engaging event or situation. It should guide students without having them figuring out what do I need to know to complete this task. I can think of one that I did, or I participated in when I was in 8th grade. We were doing, well, of course I didn't know at the time, but it was a project-based learning assignment where we were learning about the Civil War, and our entry event was actually before we were even assigned roles, because, you know, roles were assigned. She showed this video. It was probably 5 minutes long, and it just really drove home the effects of the Civil War and the horrific things that happened and everything that was at the base of the Civil War. And then she turned it off and asked, "Can this happen today?" And then we were off. And that's how you hook students. I mean, with every lesson you teach, there should be a hook, but with your project-based learning, it should really have some oomph to it. It should really get the students engaged and involved. Decision-making is also another building block. So students are allowed to make some choices about the products to be created, how they work, and how they use their time, guided by the teacher, and depending on age level and project-based learning experience. So students need to be allowed some choice in how their projects will look and be created. The teacher can still decide how, but the students have some choice in how to get there. Scaffolding is super important. You want to create those guides for the students so they can kind of have their choose your own adventure, but you've laid out all their different choices in their choose their own adventure. So schoolwork is more meaningful when it's done, when it's not done only for the teacher or the test. When students present their work to a real audience, they care more about its quality, as said in Educational Leadership Journal. This is really, really important, because when students feel like they've made a decision in their own learning, they're far more engaged than if they feel you're just kind of shoving it down their throats. Okay, critique revision. Project includes processes for students to give and receive feedback on the quality of their work, leading them to make revisions or conduct further inquiry. Critiquing is an important part of the process, so students will need to know where they need to progress based on peer and instructor feedback. This is something that you usually see in a project, but with the project-based learning, you can really get in depth with this. You can have peer revisions, one-on-one teacher revisions. You can even have, with the use of technology today, or even more low-tech, trading with other classrooms and seeing how everybody's project is progressing at the same time. Alright, now this is something that is, I don't want to say debated, but it's often viewed as optional. and we'll talk about the benefits of an audience. So students present their work to other people beyond their classmates and teacher. Some teachers view the extended audience to be optional. However, many students relate to having their work on display through presentation or even a museum setting in which parents, other students, faculty, and community members walk through the classroom and look at what the students have created. I know that for some schools, this is very common with the art program, to kind of set up an art museum or an art gallery for the community to come through and take a look at student work. But this can also be done with your project. If you take your projects out into the community or out into the world, students can see an even greater depth in what they're doing. And I'll talk about an example of a project where that happens. Okay, so these are your steps of project-based learning. And these steps are what really drives, excuse me, how you go through the process of setting up your own project-based learning. These are things to keep in mind as well as steps that you need to focus on. So for one, you identify the challenge. So at the core of PBL, project-based learning, lie a challenge that must be meaningful and doable. So set that challenge. For my social studies class in 8th grade, when we talked about the Civil War, can this happen? Okay, that sounds like a challenge. But beyond that, the challenge went further, and we are supposed to recreate the Civil War through different variations that related to more modern topics. Now, of course, we discovered through this project that a lot of the modern problems that we were feeling would cause a civil war today actually were what caused the Civil War in the first place. Maybe not the idea of slavery, but perhaps the idea of states' rights and human rights as a whole. Craft the driving question. So as a teacher, you have to come up with a driving question for your project. What is the deep understanding that teachers want students to demonstrate at the end of the project? So when it's all said and done, you have to come up with what should the students have learned. That should always be part of your process. What are the students trying to learn? Okay, so they're making cool projects, but if they're not learning anything, what was the point? You kept them entertained for 3 weeks. Okay, school isn't just about passing time, it's about learning. So you always have to keep that in mind. Craft that driving question. You also have to build the assessment. So as it says, the mantra of PBL is create and deliver. Students produce a result at the end of the project. However, the result is assessed against specific established criteria. And you establish this at the beginning of the project, and you define it in the assessment plan. Always provide your students with a rubric so they know where they're going, and this also sets up how they're going to be assessed. So yes, you found a lot of cool pictures for your Marilyn Monroe project, but that's not enough. Here's what you're being assessed on. It's not just finding pictures, it's about telling a story, that sort of thing. So always build the assessment before you build the other steps. That's where we come to plan backwards. PBL is an extended learning experience that relies on process as well as the end products. So though these students are going to create these cool projects, at the end of the day, it comes down to how you planned for them to get there. Yes, they're making choices, but you have to say, today we're doing this. This day we are achieving this this criteria and this criteria. And then at the very beginning is where you start everything. So have your driving question in mind, but you have to come up with the assessment. If you don't know where the students are headed, it's really hard to plan. Always try and plan backwards. Enroll and engage. So a field-tested set of best practices helps teachers engage students from opening day. The best part of being a teacher, especially in modern times with the internet, is somebody else has probably already done it. So looking for another teacher or even a colleague at your own school who's already achieved this is super duper helpful. You don't have to go at it alone. Project-based learning has really caught on. If you're really looking for an example or a skeleton to base your own project on, a quick search or even talking to a more experienced colleague can really help turn you in the right direction. Facilitate the team. So high performance PBL relies on teams that demonstrate commitment, purpose, and results, similar to the organizational goals of high-performing industries. Again, this is a parallel for students to real life, real world experiences and skills that they need to have. Teamwork is often viewed as a very important part of project-based learning. Now, of course, this isn't always the case. You can do individual-based projects, but you always want to have some sort of peer interaction where the students feel like they were able to get help from somebody else to reach their goal, whether that's through peer revision, peer sharing, commentary, that sort of thing, just getting somebody else involved. It shows, excuse me, commitment, purpose, results, collaboration, all of those things that students are really going to need to know. Now, of course, projects where they do involve teamwork are really, really engaging for students. The more people you can clump together, the more engaging the lesson can be. And always keep the end in mind. The PBL process is a non-linear problem-solving process that can be chaotic or divergent. A good teacher knows how to manage the workflow. Okay, so while the students, no matter how well you plan, this isn't going to go how you think it's going to go. It's a very organic process, but as long as you have that skeleton built, you know what workflow to really expect to be happening at that moment. So it can be overwhelming for a new teacher, but it can be very, very rewarding in the end. All right, integrating project-based learning. What does the research show? So PBL is a terrific method for teaching problem-solving, core concepts, skills, and creative application of knowledge. Also, indications are that students who learn through PBL perform well on standardized tests. Okay. Now, of course, we're not the biggest fan of standardized tests. However, a lot of times, student performance and your performance as a teacher will be determined by how students perform on assessments, especially standardized assessments. So students who can really grasp that abstract thinking and those core concepts and skills do perform better on standardized tests, which benefits you and them. It saves a headache for both of you. Most experts express approval for the incorporation of blended project-based learning into creative instruction. In 2012, a study of project-based learning, the majority of polled education experts agreed that improved problem-solving skills and conceptual thinking were the result of the use of project-based learning. So it shows students have more of a grasp of problem-solving and conceptual thinking, which is more in-depth than just regurgitating information. You can really get to the heart of learning when students are engaged and when they're really gaining those problem-solving and conceptual thinking skills. All right, here are some examples of successful integration. So one was a case study done in a Bay Area high school social studies classroom. They called it the AIM program. So as described, AIM is a PBL program designed to build life skills in high school students through blending academics and technology. The students make socially conscious documentary films that are presented at an end-of-the-year film festival. The students made videos about their communities and their values to be presented at the end of the year. So, as reported by the person doing the case study, students hit many dead ends and problems and had to work to fix their issues. to come to an end product. This project has been going on for 8 years at the time of the case study. Students reported feeling successful and better prepared for the workforce in college. So something creative like creating a documentary, that takes a lot of work and collaboration, and students can really respond to that. And it also makes them feel more accomplished when they reach that end goal. As a teacher, that's really, really awesome experiencing that and seeing your students feel successful, feel like they accomplished something, more than, okay, I finished that spelling test. You know, going beyond that, wow, I just finished a documentary about my own community and my values. That offers so much more, and you can still assess on spelling within the project and within revisions and that sort of thing. There's still ways to get your spelling tests in there without having to do a spelling test. Another successful integration they talk about is in Miss McIntyre's classroom. Each student would create a poster about a waterborne bacterium that can be harmful to humans, the bacterium's effects, and disease prevention and treatment. The handouts included an assignment sheet with due dates and grading policy, a guide for designing the poster, and a list of websites and books. The teacher would display the best posters. Students worked alongside established local groups to advocate cleaner seashores. Several government agencies eventually came through with funding for water monitoring at local beaches. Okay, so that's a success story. So even a small project like creating a poster can take on a larger life by having a deeper purpose. Not only would the best poster be displayed, but the students had a chance to make an impact, something that was far more of a drive than a grade. So I'm sure everybody has had to make at least one poster in their educational lifetime. Posters are great, they're nice visuals, but when you can take that deeper, that can make all the difference. A big project I like to do with my students is we study media literacy and propaganda techniques, and they have to create propaganda posters to go along with whatever book we're reading. And we share them throughout the whole school, we post them up, and they can be really foreboding, but students really, really enjoy that more in-depth than make a poster about the book. You know, you can get more learning out of students when you make it engaging. Speaking of which, I typically use this project-based learning in my classroom, and it is the multi-genre project. Multi-genre projects are just as they sound, writing projects spanning several genres. So not only are they writing a poem, but they're writing a narrative, they're writing a recipe, they're writing an invitation, a letter. There's so many different genres that students can write about while they're researching a product, while they're researching some sort of subject. So I find they're the most engaging for my students when they're trying to delve into research, and I actually have some examples. I have two picture examples that come from this book right here. It's called A Teacher's Guide to the Multi-Genre Research Project, Everything You Need to Know to Get Started, and it's by Melinda Putz. And it is a wonderful guide to everything you need to get started. Remember, the teacher librarian suggested getting an easy access best practices guide for teaching a project, kind of to help you out from opening day. This is what helped me get started, and then I was able to branch off into my own projects. So to give you an example, here's an Ellis Island project that was created and shown in the multi-research project guide. As you can see, there are several different genres present, and part of the multi-genre project is the creative presentation. So the other example right here is of Maya Angelou, and this is the several different genres, but you can see the creative presence. You're not just putting together a, uh, here's a clip together project of poetry. No, there needs to be visuals, there need to be color, uh, there needs to be art that goes along with your research, because as much as students might complain, it's something that they really relate to. Now, of course, you have different steps in your projects. So here's an example of a rough draft that happened in my classroom. This is a student's poem called Big Sister to Little Sister, and it meant a lot to her. This is her rough draft. You can even see the remnants of the frog stamp and the sun stamp she got for having some sort of rough draft present on the correct day. But beyond that, she was exploring things that meant a lot to her. For my seniors, they did a project that was a narrative, kind of like an autobiography of themselves in their multi-genre project. Because they were seniors, it was third quarter, they're really getting burned out on school before it was even close to being over, so why not have them write about what they're most interested in right now, which is themselves. So her poem, Big Sister to Little Sister, meant a lot to her and allowed her to explore how she felt essentially being the parent to her little sister because of her absent mother who was struggling with substance issues. So it says, little sister, please don't cry. Things get hard, but you have to try. Keep your head up, things will get better. Little sister, I'm here. Let's help each other, no fear, no fear. We'll start with F, the next two are E's, last letter T. Guess what? We just spelled out feet. Little sister, yes, tests are hard, but don't give up. You still have to try. Just remember the F, the next two are E's, the last letter T. Guess what, little sister? You just spelled out feet. So this is an example of a rough draft. She polished it further, and the results were wonderful. An example of the next step. So you have your first draft. Now both of these are poems, but I thought these were both good examples of different stages to be in drafts. This is after peer revision. This student, he observed a lot of behaviors in his mother with in regards to her relationships with men, and he wanted to explore that and really try and set himself apart from the I apologize, from the stereotypes of absent African American fathers. So his is called the Ode to Queens. To the women who have been hurt and abused, to the women who have been mistreated and used, steer clear of the men whose intentions are not direct. Use your heart to love without deep intellect. Queens are here to rule beside kings. Know your worth and soar. Remain independent, never let them clip your wings. Admire yourself, be proud of who you are. Treat the mirror as a universe or a galaxy. Constantly think of yourself as a star. Never think of yourself as lesser than a man. Put your mind to work. You can easily do what he can. Never fight back when a man will not stay. Turn the other cheek and simply walk away. Sweet ladies, this is just some wisdom. Refuse to lose and light your fuse. Think bright pink and never catch the blues. Deep down inside, treasure your beauty and freedom. Be the queen you are and rule your kingdom. Okay. So I thought it was a very good poem. And it was a good example of a second draft after peer revision. The final project, this is by a student named Leanna, and her project was a great example of the integration of color and pictures and making it more meaningful. So this is the final product after my revision, peer revision, research, family interviews. It all came together, and so she named it Me, Myself, and I. I had them make a table of contents, and I always include an introduction and a letter to the teacher. Those are where the students have the opportunity to really portray uh, their project, how they really explain what they're talking about. So, what the project means to them. This is the letter to me as a teacher. Now, of course, this was during my student teaching, so also wishing me well. Then you have her poem that she chose to include, a speech that she wrote, I asked them to paint a portrait of a family member with words, and hers was about her great-grandmother. And that picture cracks me up, and maybe it shouldn't, but I think her great-grandmother is adorable. She wrote a letter to her little sister, and then finally wrote a poem about being age 5, which I asked them to pick an age that was very important to them and pick some sort of genre to go along with it. An example of choosing or letting students make a choice. So every student's project obviously turned out different because the subjects were different, but beyond that, every time I introduced an option for the next genre, they had a choice between two that they could go. So either you can write a poem about age, or you can write a letter about an age, or didn't even have to, I mean, they just differ. Students really enjoyed having the choice, and it made them feel like they had some sort of say in their education, when in reality, I set the parameters and they were just making small choices. It still allowed them to be more engaged. Alright, apparently I failed at Photoshop there. Give me just a second. That's a little embarrassing. Alright, project-based learning is a modern approach that has shown definitive results. Student growth has consistently been shown with successful integration. However, teacher personality and experience plays a role in overall success. Project-based learning is yet another alternative assessment and learning tool to be utilized in the classroom. But the benefits of student thorough interaction with the topic is invaluable. So that's just my feelings on that, is that students really benefit through interaction with the topic and in-depth interaction. So rather than copy down this chapter on, or all the vocab in this chapter on how chemical bonds are formed, make a project, have the students explore, work in teams. They will remember it so much better than if they did not. When I was pre-med, I could not tell you how thankful I was that my teacher made a project involving the Krebs cycle. So when it came time to be tested in college, I could come back with it like that because I spent 3 weeks working through the Krebs cycle. So that's, I feel project-based learning is a very important tool for the modern teacher, and I think that it is something that students will really take to heart and will really remember. You can still meet those Common Core standards, but you can do it in a way that the students will not be dying the whole time that you're trying to get this across to them. So, and then finally, these are all my references. So, educational leadership, creative education, teacher librarian, the book that I showed you, Forbes magazine. I used a lot of different journals because I found journals are so helpful when you're a teacher. So anyway, I hope you learned something about project-based learning, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.